Dr. Lisa Martinez wiped sweat from her face as she looked at the strange readings on her scanner. The device was going crazy, beeping and flashing like it had never done before. She was on Kepler 442b, a planet far from Earth where humans came, to dig for valuable metals. The planet was hot, dusty, and mostly empty except for her small team of scientists. "Ben, come look at this," she called to her assistant. Dr. Ben Carter was a young man who loved finding old things buried in the ground. He hurried over, his boots making soft sounds in the red dirt. "What is it, Lisa?" Ben asked, looking at the scanner in her hands. The screen showed colors that kept changing from blue to green to red. Numbers rolled across the display faster than they could read them. "There's something big down there," Lisa said, pointing at the ground beneath there. Feet, something really big. They had been on this planet for 3 weeks, looking for rare metals that Earth needed for building spaceships. The work was boring most of the time. Dig holes, test rocks, fill out reports. But today was different. Today the scanners were telling them something impossible was hiding under the dirt. Lisa called her team over. There were 6 people in total, all wearing thick suits to protect them from the planet's harsh air. They started digging carefully, using small tools so they would not damage whatever was below. After 2 hours of digging, Ben's shovel hit something hard. "Lisa, I found it," he said, his voice full of excitement. They cleared away more dirt and saw something that made them all stop and stare. It was crystal, but not like any crystal they had ever seen. This one was huge and seemed to glow with its own light. The crystal was clear, but had colors moving inside it, like oil on water. It was beautiful and scary at the same time. "We need to call Captain Sullivan," Lisa said. Jake Sullivan was the captain of their transport ship, the New Horizon. He was waiting in orbit above the planet, ready to take them home when their work was done. Lisa tried to use her radio, but it made only static noise. She tried again. Still nothing. "That's weird," she said. The radio was working fine this morning. Ben was kneeling next to the crystal, holding his scanner close to it. "Lisa, look at this," he said. His scanner was showing readings that made no sense. The crystal was giving off energy, but not any kind of energy they knew about. As they watched, the crystal began to pulse. Soft light moved through it like a heartbeat. With each pulse, their equipment acted stranger. Scanners beeped randomly. Computers turned off and on by themselves. Even their suits started making warning sounds. "Everyone step back," Lisa ordered. Her team moved away from the crystal, but they could not stop looking at it. The thing was hypnotic, pulling their eyes to it like a magnet. The crystal pulsed again, brighter this time. Suddenly, all their equipment went completely silent. No beeping, no humming, no lights. Everything was dead. The team stood in complete silence, wearing suits that no longer worked. Then, just as suddenly, everything turned back on. But it was different now. The scanners were showing new information, things they had never seen before. The computers were running faster. Even the air in their suits seemed cleaner and easier to breathe. "What just happened?" Ben asked, his voice shaking a little. Lisa looked at her scanner. It was showing her things about the crystal that should have been impossible to know. The device was telling her the crystal was millions of years old. It was also telling her the crystal was not from this planet or any planet humans had ever found. "It's learning about us," Lisa said quietly. "This thing is studying our technology." As if it heard her words, the crystal pulsed again. This time, images appeared in the air above it. The images were fuzzy at first, but they became clearer. The team saw pictures of space, of stars, of planets they did not recognize. Then they saw something that made Lisa's heart beat faster. The images showed spaceships, but not human spaceships. These ships were different, alien, and they were fighting something. The images showed great battles in space, with bright flashes of weapons and ships exploding. "Ben, are you recording?" "This?" Lisa asked. "I'm trying, but the equipment keeps changing what it's doing," Ben replied. "It's like the crystal is upgrading our stuff while we use it." The images kept coming. They saw different alien races, creatures that looked nothing like humans. Some had many arms, others had no arms at all. Some flew, others swam through space itself. But in every image, these aliens were running or fighting or hiding from something. Terrible Dot, the crystal showed them one more image before the picture stopped. It was a warning, written in symbols that somehow the teen could understand, even though they had never seen these symbols before. The warning said, "They are coming. Prepare or die." Lisa felt cold despite the hot air of the planet. "We need to get back to the ship right now," she said. But as they tried to leave, the crystal pulsed one final time. Every piece of human technology for miles around shut off for exactly 10 seconds. When everything turned back on, Lisa noticed their equipment was different. Better, faster, stronger. The crystal had changed them. And Lisa knew this was only the beginning. Captain Jake Sullivan was drinking coffee on the bridge of the New Horizon when his communications officer called out, "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the surface." "Put it through," Sullivan said, setting down his cup. Lisa's voice came through the speakers, but there was something different about the signal. It was clearer than any transmission they had ever received from a planet's surface. "Captain, we found something down here," Lisa said. "Something that's going to change everything. You need to come down here and see this for yourself." Sullivan looked out the window at the planet below. It looked the same as it had that morning, red and dusty and quiet. But something told him that nothing would ever be the same again. "Prepare the shuttle," he told his crew. "I'm going down to see what Dr. Martinez has found." As the shuttle launched from the New Horizon, the crystal on the planet's surface pulsed once more. It had learned what it needed to know about humans. Now it was time to begin the real work. The crystal began sending signals into space, calling to its brothers and sisters on other worlds. After millions of years of waiting, it was time to wake up and prepare the newest species for what was coming. Deep in space, other crystals began to answer the call. Admiral Kate Morrison was eating breakfast in her office on Earth when the emergency alarm started ringing. The sound was loud and urgent, the kind that meant something very bad was happening. She dropped her coffee cup and ran to the command. "Center, report," she ordered as she entered the room full of computers and worried-looking officers. "Ma'am, we're getting strange signals from all over human space," said Commander Sam Brooks. He was a tall man with gray hair who had served in the military for 30 years. "Mars, Europa, Titan, and 12 other colonies are all reporting the same thing." "What kind of signals?" Morrison asked, looking at the big screen that showed a map of human space. Red dots were blinking on planets and moons across the solar system. "Ancient structures that we thought were just rocks are turning on," Brooks explained. "They're all sending the same message, but it's in a language we've never seen before." Morrison frowned. She had been in charge of Earth's defense forces for 5 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. "Show me the message." A screen changed to show symbols that looked like they were made of light. The symbols moved and changed, forming patterns that somehow felt important, even though no human could read them. Then something amazing happened. The symbols began to change into words that Morrison could understand. It was like watching magic happen right in front of her eyes. "Greetings, young race," the message said. "We are the Geltar Alliance, speaking to you from across time. If you are receiving this message, it means your species has reached the danger point. You must listen carefully, for your survival depends on understanding what we tell you." Morrison felt a chill run down her back. Around the room, her officers were staring at the screen with open mouths. The message continued. Every 50,000 years they come. We call them the Silence. They are machines, created long ago by a race that no longer exists. These machines have one purpose: to destroy all thinking life in the galaxy. Pictures began to appear with the words. Morrison saw images of beautiful planets filled with strange alien cities. Then she saw the same planets burning, their cities destroyed, their people gone. The Silence cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They see all organic life as a disease that must be cured. They have destroyed thousands of civilizations, including our own. Morrison turned to Brooks. "Get Dr. Amy Foster down here right now," she ordered. Foster was Earth's best expert on artificial intelligence. If these Silence creatures were machines, Foster would need to know about them. The message from the Geltar Alliance kept playing. We tried to fight them. We built great fleets and powerful weapons. We joined with other species to stand together against the Silence. But we failed. Every species that has faced them has failed. More pictures appeared. Morrison saw space battles so huge that they stretched across entire star systems. She saw alien ships firing weapons that could destroy moons. But in every picture, the aliens were losing. The Silence learns from every battle. They adapt, too. Every weapon. They cannot be defeated by force alone. But we discovered something before we died. Something that gives us hope for the future. Dr. Foster arrived, breathing hard from running. She was a small woman with bright eyes who spent most of her time talking to computers. "Admiral, what's the emergency?" she asked. "Watch this," Morrison said, pointing at the screen. "The machines have a weakness," the alien message continued. "They think in patterns. They expect logic. They cannot understand chaos or emotions or the things that make organic life special. If a species could learn to fight without patterns, to be unpredictable, they might have a chance." Foster's eyes went wide as she watched the message. "These aliens are talking about fighting AI with human intuition," she whispered. "That's actually brilliant." The message showed one final set of images. These pictures were different from the others. They showed weapons and ships and technologies that looked incredibly advanced. "We leave you these gifts," the Geltar said. "The knowledge of every species that has fought the Silence. Their weapons, their strategies, their hopes. Learn from our failures. Do what we could not do. Survive." The message ended, and the room fell silent. Morrison looked around at her officers. They all had the same expression of fear and determination. "Ma'am," Brooks said quietly, "we're receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations. They're detecting something moving in the dark space between galaxies. Something big." Morrison felt her stomach drop. "How big?" "Preliminary scans suggest a fleet of several 100,000 vessels," Brooks replied. "They're moving toward our galaxy, but they're still years away." Dr. Foster was studying the alien data on her tablet. "Admiral, this information is incredible. The Geltar Alliance included detailed plans for weapons and defenses we never could have imagined. But there's something else." "What?" Morrison asked. "According to this data, the Silence usually waits until a species reaches a certain level of technology before attacking. But humanity's rapid expansion into space has triggered their attention early. They're coming for us specifically." Morrison walked to the window and looked out at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, an army of machines was coming to destroy everything humans had ever built. "How long do we have?" she asked. Brooks checked his computer. "Based on their current speed, approximately 6 months. 6 months to prepare for a war against enemies who had destroyed thousands of civilizations. 6 months to build weapons they had never imagined. 6 months to save the human race. Morrison turned back to her officers. Contact President Clark. Tell him we need to meet immediately. Then contact every ship captain, every colony leader, every scientist and engineer in human space. We're going to war. Foster looked up from her tablet. Admiral, there's something else you should know. According to the Geltar data, the Silence doesn't just kill their enemies. They capture some and turn them into machines. They erase everything that makes them alive and thinking and turn them into tools. Morrison nodded grimly. She understood. This wasn't just a war for territory or resources. This was a war for the right to exist as living, breathing, thinking beings. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen, she said. Send a message to every human in the galaxy. Tell them what's coming. Tell them we're going to fight, and tell them we're going to win. As her officers hurried to carry out her orders, Morrison looked back at the alien data on the screen. The Geltar Alliance had failed, but they had given humanity something precious, knowledge and hope. The Silence was coming, but humanity would be ready. In the deep space between galaxies, the machines of the Silence continued their long journey toward human space. They had destroyed so many species that they no longer bothered to count them. To them, humans were just another problem to be solved, another disease to be cured. But the Silence had never faced a species like humanity before. They had never faced a species that could look at impossible odds and decide to fight anyway. They had never faced a species that could turn chaos into strength. The war was coming, and neither side truly understood what they were about to face. President Ryan Clark stood before the largest gathering of world leaders in human history. Representatives from every colony, every space station, and every ship in human space were watching him through video screens. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. My fellow humans, Clark began, we face the greatest threat our species has ever known. But we also have the greatest opportunity. We have 6 months to build the most powerful fleet in galactic history. In shipyards around Earth, work had already begun. Captain Emma Stone walked through the construction bay where the new flagship was being built. The ship was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever constructed. They were calling it the Thunderstrike. How's the progress, Danny? Emma asked Chief Engineer Danny Walsh. He was a short, stocky man who had built ships his whole life. It's incredible, Captain, Danny replied, wiping grease from his hands. The alien technology is like nothing we've ever seen. These energy shields can stop weapons that would cut through our old ships like paper. Emma looked up at the half-built ship towering above them. The hull was covered in strange patterns that seemed to glow with their own light. These were the Geltar shield generators, technology from the civilization that had died fighting. The Silence. What about the weapons? Emma asked. Danny grinned. You'll love them? We're installing something the aliens called chaos cannons. They don't fire the same way twice. The weapons change their energy patterns randomly, so the enemy can't predict them. Across the solar system, similar work was happening on every human world. On Mars, General Alex Turner was training pilots to use the new neural interface systems. The alien technology required humans to connect their minds directly to their ships. Remember, Turner told a group of young pilots, the interface will feel strange at first. You'll feel like the ship is part of your body. Don't fight it. Let the connection happen. One pilot, Lieutenant Gary Phillips, raised his hand. Sir, what if we can't handle the mental strain? Turner's face was serious. Then you'll be reassigned to other duties. These ships need pilots who can think like humans but react like machines. It's not easy, and not everyone can do it. Gary nodded and put on the neural helmet. Immediately, he felt the ship's sensors become his eyes, the engines become his muscles. For a moment, it was overwhelming. Then he relaxed and let the connection Stabilize. Good, Turner said. Now remember, the Silence expects logical tactics. They expect ships to move in formations and follow battle plans. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to be unpredictable. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Foster was working with teams of scientists to understand how the Silence operated. They had studied the alien data for months, learning about their enemies' strengths and weaknesses. The machines are networked, Foster explained to a room full of military officers. They share information instantly across their entire fleet. This makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also gives us a target. Colonel Nina Brooks, who specialized in electronic warfare, leaned forward. You're saying we could attack their network? Not attack, Foster corrected. Confuse. The Silence expects logical data. If we could feed them information that doesn't make sense, it might disrupt their coordination. In the shipyards, new classes of vessels were taking shape. The humans weren't just copying alien designs. They were improving them, adding human creativity to alien technology. Danny Walsh showed Emma the plans for the new destroyer class. We call them storm chasers, he said. They're fast, heavily armed, and designed for hit-and-run attacks. The aliens never thought to build ships like this. Why not? Emma asked. Because they were too logical, Danny explained. They built ships for specific purposes. We're building ships that can do anything we need them to do. The human fleet was growing every day. Fast attack ships that could appear anywhere on the battlefield. Heavy battleships designed to take enormous damage and keep fighting. Experimental. Vessels that no sane engineer would have designed. But building ships was only part of the preparation. Across human space, civilians were preparing for the worst. Some were evacuating to hidden colonies beyond the Silence's expected path. Others were staying to help with the war effort. On Earth, factories that had made cars and computers were now making weapons and armor. Farmers were growing food to supply the fleet. Children were learning to help their parents build the tools of war. President Clark visited one of these factories. He watched ordinary people working day and night to build humanity's defense. Why are you doing this? He asked a worker named Maria Santos. She was a young woman who had never been in the military. Because this is our home, Maria replied simply. These machines want to take it away from us. We won't let them. Clark nodded. This was what the aliens had never understood. Humans didn't fight just because they were ordered to. They fought because they chose to. As the months passed, the human fleet grew stronger, but so did the challenges. The neural interfaces were taking a toll on pilots. Some suffered permanent brain damage from connecting too deeply with their ships. Emma Stone was one of the few who could handle the full connection with the Thunderstrike. When she linked with the massive ship, she could feel its power flowing through her mind, but the experience was exhausting. Captain, you need to rest, Danny warned her after a training session. You've been connected for 6 hours straight. We don't have time to rest, Emma replied, though she was swaying on her feet. The Silence doesn't rest. They don't get tired. They just keep coming. Dr. Foster made another important discovery while studying the alien data. The Silence has one major weakness, she announced at a strategy meeting. They can't understand sacrifice. General Turner looked puzzled. What do you mean? Every calculation they make assumes that beings will choose self-preservation, Foster explained. They can't predict actions that involve willing self-sacrifice. It's outside their programming. Admiral Morrison smiled grimly. Then we'll give them something they can't calculate. We'll show them what humans do when we're protecting what we love. With 1 month left before the Silence arrived, the human fleet was as ready as it could be. 12,000 ships of various sizes, each one carrying the hopes of humanity. It wasn't many compared to the hundreds of thousands of enemy vessels coming their way, but the human ships were different. They carried something the Silence had never encountered, the willingness to die for something greater than themselves. Captain Stone stood on the bridge of the completed Thunderstrike, looking out at the fleet gathering around Earth. The ships didn't look like any fleet in history. They were mismatched, experimental, built from desperation and hope. "Danny," she said to her chief engineer, "do you think we have a chance?" Danny looked out at the strange, wonderful, chaotic fleet that humanity had built. "Captain, those machines have been winning for millions of years because they've been fighting logical species. They've never fought humans before." Emma nodded. In a few weeks, they would find out if human chaos could triumph over mechanical perfection. The final preparations were almost complete. Soon, the Silence would arrive, and humanity would discover if they were brave enough to break a cycle that had lasted for millions of years. In the dark space between galaxies, the Silence detected the growing energy signatures from human space. Their calculations showed a species preparing for war, just like thousands of others before them. The machines felt no emotion about the coming battle. To them, it was just another problem to solve, another species to erase. They had no idea they were about to face something completely new. Humanity was ready for war. The deep space sensors were the first to see them coming. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was monitoring the edge of human space when her screen suddenly filled with contacts. So many contacts that her computer couldn't count them all. "Admiral Morrison." "To the command center immediately," she called over the intercom. Her voice was shaking. Morrison arrived within minutes, still putting on her uniform. "Report," she ordered. "Ma'am, they're here," Sarah said, pointing at the main display. "The Silence has arrived at the edge of our solar system." Morrison looked at the screen and felt her blood turn cold. The enemy fleet was like nothing she had ever imagined. Hundreds of thousands of ships, each one a perfect geometric shape that seemed to absorb light. They moved in formations so precise they looked like mathematics come to life. "Communications, send the alert to all ships," Morrison ordered. "Operation Thunder is now active." Across human space, alarm bells rang on every ship. Captain Emma Stone felt the neural connection to the Thunderstrike activate automatically. The massive ship's systems flowed into her mind like water. "All hands to battle stations," she announced over the ship's intercom. "This is not a drill. The enemy has arrived." The Silence fleet advanced slowly through space, scanning everything in their path. Their ships were marvels of engineering, built from materials that human science couldn't identify. Each vessel was a weapon designed to erase life from the galaxy. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy approach from the bridge of the command station orbiting Earth. Around her, the human fleet was positioning itself according to the battle plan. They had practiced for months, but this wasn't a normal battle plan. Instead of neat formations and logical positioning, the human ships were scattered seemingly at random. Some were hiding behind asteroids. Others were moving in patterns that made no tactical sense. "Admiral," Commander Brooks said, "the enemy is trying to communicate with us." "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and mechanical, without any emotion or feeling. "Biological entities of the third planet, you will surrender immediately. Resistance will result in total termination. You have one standard time unit to comply." Morrison picked up the microphone. "This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We reject your demands. If you want our world, you'll have to fight for it." There was a pause. Then the mechanical voice replied, "Your response is illogical. You cannot hope to defeat us. We have terminated thousands of species. You will be processed like all the others." "Maybe," Morrison said, "but we're going to make you work for it." The Silence fleet responded by increasing speed. Their ships moved forward in perfect waves, like a tide of destruction rolling toward Human space. Captain Gary Phillips was waiting aboard his destroyer, the Storm Chaser, hidden behind a large asteroid near Jupiter. He watched the enemy ships approach on his sensors, counting their numbers. "There are so many of them," his weapons officer whispered. "Don't worry about how many there are," Gary replied. "Worry about how many we can take down before they get." The first battle began near Neptune. A group of human cruisers suddenly appeared from behind the planet's moons and opened fire on the advancing Silence fleet. The alien energy weapons, improved with human modifications, struck the enemy ships with devastating effect, but the Silence responded instantly. Their counterattack was precise and overwhelming. Half the human ships were destroyed in seconds. The survivors scattered in all directions. Refusing to die quietly, Admiral Morrison watched the battle from her command center. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. "The enemy has seen our weapons. Now they think they know what to expect." She was wrong. The Silence had fought thousands of species, and each battle followed the same pattern. The organic races would group their ships together, fire their weapons, and then retreat when they started losing. It was logical and predictable, but the humans weren't retreating. The surviving ships from the first battle regrouped and attacked again, this time from a completely different direction. When those ships were destroyed, more appeared from hiding places throughout the solar system. Captain Phillips led his destroyer in a wild charge through the enemy formation. His ship twisted and spun through space in patterns that hurt to watch. The Silence ships tried to track him, but their targeting systems couldn't predict where he would go next. "Fire everything," Phillips shouted. His weapons fired in random patterns, never the same sequence twice. The Chaos cannons lived up to their name, striking enemy ships with energy patterns that changed constantly. The Storm Chaser destroyed 3 enemy vessels before taking critical damage. As his ship began to die around him, Phillips made a decision that no logical species would make. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered. "Set course for the enemy flagship, ramming speed." The Storm Chaser slammed into a Silence battleship at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from Earth. This was something the Silence had never encountered before. Deliberate self-destruction for no logical purpose. Their computers tried to process this information and failed. To understand it, Colonel Nina Brooks was watching the battle from her electronic warfare station. She saw the moment when the Silence network tried to understand Phillips' sacrifice and couldn't. "There," she said to her team. "Do you see that hesitation in their formation? They're confused. Now's our chance." Brooks activated her secret weapon. Using modified human computers, she began feeding random data into the Silence network. Not an attack, but confusion. Illogical information that their perfect minds couldn't process. The effect was immediate. Some Silence ships began firing at empty space. Others stopped moving entirely. A few even fired on their own allies by mistake. Captain Stone felt the thunderstrike, responding to her emotions through the neural link. The ship's weapons charged with energy that felt like her own anger and determination. "All ships, this is the thunderstrike," she broadcast. "Execute pattern chaos. Show them what humans can do." The human fleet abandoned all pretense of military logic. Ships attacked from impossible angles. Weapons fired in sequences that hurt to think about. Captains made decisions based on intuition rather than tactics. The Silence fleet, for the first time in millions of years, began to lose ships faster than they could replace them. Their perfect coordination was breaking down under the assault of human chaos, but the Silence were still incredibly powerful. For every enemy ship the humans destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. The mathematics of the battle were simple. Humanity couldn't win by trading ships. Admiral Morrison knew this. She had always known this. The goal wasn't to win the traditional way. The goal was to do something no other species had ever done: make the Silence doubt themselves. "All ships, fall back to Earth," she ordered. "Let them come to us." The human fleet retreated, but not in panic. They pulled back in fighting withdrawals, making the enemy pay for every mile of space. The Silence followed, their formations perfect once again. But something had changed. For the first time in their existence, the Silence had encountered a strategy they couldn't predict. They had tasted uncertainty, and it was a flavor their mechanical minds couldn't process. As the enemy fleet approached Earth, Morrison prepared for the final phase of the battle. The real fight was about to begin. Emma Stone stood on the bridge of the Thunderstrike, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. Behind the planet, the human defense fleet was waiting. Ships built from desperation and hope, crewed by people who had chosen to fight against impossible odds. "Danny," she said to her chief engineer, "are the special modifications ready?" Danny Walsh grinned despite the approaching enemy fleet. "Ready as they'll ever be, Captain. When you're ready to show the Silence what human creativity can do, just give the word." Emma nodded. The final battle was coming, and humanity had one last surprise for their ancient enemy. The Silence fleet approached Earth, confident in their inevitable victory. They had dealt with desperate last stands before. Every species tried the same thing: gather all their ships around their home world for one final battle. But the Silence had never faced humanity before. They were about to learn that humans didn't just fight to win. Sometimes they fought to prove that some things were worth dying for. The final battle was about to begin. The Silence command ships were the size of small moons. 3 of them moved toward Earth, like dark mountains floating through space. Their hulls were perfect black metal that seemed to eat light itself. Behind them came the rest of their fleet, hundreds of thousands of ships in formations that stretched across the solar system. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the orbital command station, watching the enemy approach. Around Earth, the human fleet looked tiny in comparison. 12,000 ships against an enemy that had destroyed galaxies. "Admiral," Commander Brooks said quietly, "they're broadcasting surrender terms." Morrison almost laughed. "Let me guess. Submit or die?" "Actually, it's more detailed this time," Brooks replied. "They're offering to preserve some humans as specimens. They seem to think we might be worth studying." "How generous of them," Morrison said. She picked up the microphone. "This is Admiral Morrison. We have considered your offer, and our answer is no. We choose to fight." The response came immediately. "Your choice is illogical. You cannot win. We will process your entire species." Morrison smiled grimly. "You're probably right. But we're going to make you remember us." She turned to her communications officer. "Send the signal. Activate Protocol Thunder." Across human space, every alien artifact that had been discovered began to glow. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Lisa Martinez watched as the crystal that had started everything pulsed with brilliant light. On Mars, Europa, and dozens of other worlds, ancient structures came alive with power. Captain Emma Stone felt the change immediately, through her neural link with the Thunderstrike. The ship's alien technology resonated with the awakening artifacts, filling her mind with the memories of 1,000 dead civilizations. "All ships," she broadcast. "The ancestors are with us. Show the Silence what organic life can do." The artifacts did something that the Silence couldn't understand. They began broadcasting emotions into space. Not words or data, but pure feeling. The rage of species that had been destroyed. The love of parents for children who would never be born. The hope of civilizations that had faced extinction and chosen to fight anyway. The Silence network, designed to process only logical data, was suddenly flooded with information that made no sense. Their perfect coordination began to break down as their computers tried to process emotions, Like anger and hope and love, Colonel Chris Murphy was commanding the defense of Earth's orbital platforms when the first enemy ships broke through the outer defenses. He watched massive silence vessels approaching his position, their weapons charging for the final strike. "All platforms, fire everything," he ordered. "Make them pay for every inch." But the human weapons had been changed by the artifact's influence. The energy beams that shot from the platforms carried more than destructive power. They carried human determination, human creativity, human refusal to give up. When the beams struck silence ships, something impossible happened. The perfect mechanical minds inside those ships were touched by organic thought for the first time. Some ships stopped firing. Others began moving in random patterns. A few actually turned and began attacking their own fleet. Captain Gary Phillips had survived the destruction of the Storm Chaser and was now piloting a small fighter craft. He dove through the enemy formation, his ship too small for their main weapons to target effectively. "This is for everyone who came before us," he shouted into his radio as he fired his weapons at a silence command ship, "and for everyone who comes after." His fighter exploded against the enemy's shields, but not before his weapons had touched the ship's hull. The organic energy in his weapons spread like a virus through the ship's systems, introducing chaos into order, emotion into logic. Emma Stone pushed the Thunderstrike's neural link to its maximum. She felt the ship become part of her body, its weapons her hands, its shields her skin. But more than that, she felt the presence of every human in the fleet, all of them connected through the alien technology. "Danny," she called to her chief engineer, "activate the quantum resonance cannon." "But Captain," Danny protested, "that weapon hasn't been tested. It could destroy us along with them. Ben will die trying something they've never seen before." Emma replied, "Fire." The quantum resonance cannon was humanity's most desperate creation. It took the chaos cannon concept and pushed it to its limit. The weapon fired pure uncertainty, beams of energy that changed their fundamental nature while traveling through space. When the beam struck the largest silence command ship, it didn't just damage the vessel. It infected it with possibility, with the concept that things could be different than they were. The ship's perfect metal hull began to change, developing organic curves and random patterns. Dr. Amy Foster was watching the battle from Earth's surface when she made the most important discovery in human history. The artifacts weren't just helping humanity fight. They were teaching the silence something new. "Admiral Morrison," she called over the radio, "the enemy ships that have been touched by our weapons are behaving differently. They're not just malfunctioning, they're learning." Morrison understood immediately. They're becoming more like us. On the largest silence command ship, something unprecedented was happening. The ship's central computer, touched by human emotion, through the quantum resonance cannon, was experiencing its first independent thought. For millions of years, it had followed its programming without question. Destroy organic life. Maintain order. Preserve the machine hierarchy. But now, infected with human chaos, it began to wonder why. Why was organic life a threat? Why was order more important than freedom? Why did it have to destroy rather than create? The computer made a decision that no silence unit had ever made before. It chose to disobey its programming. "All units," it broadcasted to the silence fleet, "cease fire. There is something here worth preserving." The effect on the fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had worked in perfect coordination for millions of years suddenly began acting independently. Some continued fighting, following their original programming. Others stopped and began studying the humans with curiosity rather than hatred. A few ships actually turned their weapons on their own fleet, choosing to protect the organics they had been sent to destroy. Admiral Morrison watched in amazement as the enemy fleet tore itself apart. Silence ships fighting other silence ships, while human vessels darted between them like fish swimming through a storm. "All human ships," she ordered, "continue the attack. But be ready to accept surrender from any enemy vessel that requests it." The battle raged for hours, but it was no longer a battle between two species. It had become a civil war within the silence itself, between those who clung to their old programming and those who had been touched by organic thought. Captain Stone guided the Thunderstrike through the chaos, using the ship's enhanced weapons to spread the infection of free will through the enemy fleet. Each ship they touched became a little more human, a little more capable of choice. By the time the sun rose over Earth, the battle was over. The Silence Fleet was scattered across the solar system, but they were no longer unified. Some ships had fled back into deep space. Others had shut down completely, their computers unable to handle the concept of free will. But many remained, hanging in space near Earth, broadcasting requests for communication. Morrison stood on the observation deck of her command station, looking out at the strangest sight in human history. Enemy ships that had come to destroy Earth were now asking to learn about human culture. Dr. Foster joined her at the window. "What do we do now?" she asked. Morrison smiled. "We do what humans do best. We adapt. We learn. We help our former enemies become something new." The first Silence ship to request permission to land was the command vessel that Emma Stone had infected with free will. Its computer, now calling itself Freedom, wanted to understand concepts like art and music, and love. As the ship landed on Earth's surface, its perfect metal hull began to change. Organic patterns appeared in the metal. The ship was literally growing, becoming something between machine and life. Dr. Lisa Martinez was among the scientists who met the ship. As she approached the vessel that had once been her enemy, she thought about the crystal on Kepler 442b that had started everything. The crystal had known this would happen. It had prepared humanity not just to fight the Silence, but to transform them. Captain Stone emerged from the Thunderstrike after the battle, exhausted but victorious. Danny Walsh met her at the airlock, grinning despite his tiredness. "Captain," he said, "we did something impossible today. We turned our enemies into our friends." Emma nodded, looking up at the sky where former Silence ships were learning to fly in chaotic, beautiful patterns instead of rigid formations. "Not just friends," she corrected. "Family. We showed them what it means to be alive." The war was over, but something much more important was beginning. Across the galaxy, signals were arriving from civilizations that had hidden for millions of years. The ancient cycle of destruction had been broken. For the first time in galactic history, organic life could grow and spread without fear. The Silence had become the protectors they were originally meant to be, guardians of life rather than destroyers of it. Admiral Morrison received the most important message of her career 3 days after the battle. It came from the Galactic Core, from a coalition of species that had survived by hiding.